This is Death by Red Tape, an Island Whodunnit origin story, written by Tess Marlowe and narrated by Sarah.
Hi, Tess Marlowe here. Before Chapter 1 begins, please take 1 second to look at your screen and hit subscribe. It helps me bring you more free cozy mysteries.
Chapter 1. There were two things Colonel Reginald Wyatt O'Malley III hated more than paperwork: dress whites and embassy parties. He happened to be wearing one and attending the other, which put him in a charitable mood, or so he told himself. The U.S. Embassy in Nairobi had gone full State Department chic. Lanterns strung through the jacaranda trees, polished speeches echoing off marble columns, and a quartet playing an instrumental cover of something that might have been Taylor Swift if you were deaf in one ear. At the far end, a glossy step-and-repeat banner displayed the twin logos of the U.S. Department of Defense and the Kenyan Defense Forces, the official backdrop for the week's kickoff of joint counterterrorism exercises. He hadn't been given a clear reason for the party, only that, as the American colonel leading next week's joint counterterrorism training, he was highly encouraged to attend, which in military speak meant show up or you'll get punished. Reggie's unit hadn't arrived yet. He was in country early for the planning sessions, and technically off-duty tonight, which didn't explain why he was stiff as hell in his uniform, with a gin and tonic he didn't want, nodding at speeches from people who'd never set foot in a live training zone. At least Bombay was having a good time. He stretched out at his feet in a pristine black vest marked U.S. Navy K-9 Bombay. He'd already posed for 7 photos, stolen a canapé off a tray, and been the star of the party the whole night. "You're the belle of the ball," Reg said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Next time I'm sewing the medals on your dress uniform." Bombay tilted his head and gave a slow blink. A nearby diplomat laughed, clearly thinking the colonel was joking. Across the garden, General Martin Wakesa caught Reggie's eye and waved him over with the easy camaraderie of someone used to commanding a room. Reg liked Wakesa. In the 3 days they'd spent planning next week's drills, the man had proven competent, relaxed, and sharper than most officers twice his pay grade. Wakesa stood near the drink station beside a tall woman in a beaded indigo gown, his wife, if Reg remembered right. "Your dog is stealing the spotlight," Wakesa said with a smile, crouching to scratch behind Bombay's ears. "Smart tactic. I'll bring a cheetah next time." "Only if it's house-trained," Reg replied. Wakesa straightened. "First time in Nairobi?" "Not quite. Did a stint down in Manda Bay a while back. This is significantly better catered." Wakesa chuckled. "That's because Uncle Sam is footing the bill." A woman in pearls leaned in, smiling too widely. "Excuse me, Colonel General, would you mind if I got a photo with the dog?" Reg blinked. "Sure." She was already handing her phone to someone. "He's so charming." "She's not wrong," Wakesa smiled. "I would love a dog, but my wife is a nurse and everything in our house has to be sterile." The woman in question turned with the softest smile, inclined her head, and drifted off to greet someone near the buffet. Wakesa sipped his drink, eyes briefly following her. "We've been married for 21 years. Half that time I've been deployed or in negotiations. You ever married, Colonel?" "Twice," Reg said. "Swore it off the second time." Wakesa gave a knowing grin. "Ah, then you understand the itch." Reg raised an eyebrow. "I understand some itches are better ignored." That earned him a low laugh and a clap on the shoulder. "Well said, though my own indulgences are mostly harmless." Reg chose not to dig into that. Nairobi politics had a rhythm of their own, and Reg had no interest in figuring out whose egos were glued together with whose secrets. "Cheers to international cooperation," he offered instead, lifting his glass. They toasted with the kind of practiced ease shared by soldiers who've survived too many briefings. By the time the speeches began, Reg had escaped to the edge of the garden. Bombay parked loyally beside a topiary shaped like a giraffe. The ambassador was on the mic now, gesturing broadly. "This is our chance to stand together and protect the future of our two great nations, and we are not going to throw away that chance." Next to him, a young Kenyan officer leaned over and muttered, "Is your ambassador loosely quoting Hamilton, or am I missing something?" Reg bit back a grin. The man built a whole stage for a gala. What did you expect? The crowd clapped politely. Champagne was refreshed. The string quartet pivoted to a painfully slow rendition of Uptown Funk. Reg had just begun calculating how much longer he needed to stay, not to get a dressing down from the brass, when he caught sight of a woman gliding through the crowd. Lydia Ochieng. He'd seen her name on internal memos but hadn't met her yet. Cultural attaché. Kenyan staff. Silk bronze dress. A clipboard in her left hand even now. She moved with purpose, gently redirecting a too-drunk contractor away from the mic, smoothing over a missed cue with the quartet, whispering to a server who had nearly knocked over a pyramid of glassware. She wasn't dazzling. She was unflappable, the kind of woman who'd saved 6 people from embarrassment in the past hour and made it look easy. Reg admired that kind of competence, from a distance. He wasn't the only one watching. A few glances followed her as she passed, mostly respectful, 1 or 2 curious. Lydia didn't seem to notice. Maybe she'd just learned to ignore it. "Colonel," said a clipped voice beside him, "I hope you're enjoying the night." Reg turned to see Amelia Price, the deputy chief of mission, blonde, skinny, curated. She looked like she hadn't blinked since 2004. "Do you want the truth or the polite version?" Amelia ignored that. "Your presence tonight is appreciated. The optics of joint cooperation are delicate." "I'm here for the canapés and soft diplomacy." "You're here," she corrected, "because we can't afford a headline that says U.S. military no-shows peace gala." "Well," Reg said, lifting his gin and tonic, "good thing you got drinks." She didn't laugh. He watched her stride away and exhaled slowly. "Charming woman," he muttered. Bombay sneezed in agreement. The clink of silverware drew the crowd's attention toward a new speaker. A Kenyan MP, Reg hadn't caught his name, was trying to make a joke about football and counter-terrorism. It wasn't landing. Beside him, Wekisa muttered, "This is why we don't let him near real negotiations." Reg smirked. "Does it get worse?" He once compared drone strikes to dating apps. Oh, Lord. He said they both involved too much screening and poor results. Reg choked on his drink. The speech mercifully ended. The crowd dispersed. Dessert arrived, small cakes shaped like shields. Someone near the patio started dancing slightly too early. Bombay sniffed a table leg, unimpressed. Suddenly, a young voice rang out, "Excuse me. Someone needs to come. I think she fainted." A woman in a floral dress stood near the corridor entrance, looking pale. 2 staffers rushed past her. Reggie's instincts flared. Bombay was already on his feet. By the time he reached the hallway near the powder room, the crowd had gone quiet. Lydia Ochieng was on the floor. Her dress shimmered in the hallway lights. 1 shoe had come off. Her clipboard was tucked under her arm as if she'd meant to deliver it somewhere. One of the staffers was kneeling beside her trying to wake her. A second was already calling medical. Bombay hovered beside her body and sat, ears alert, unmoving. Reg crouched to check her pulse. Nothing. He stepped back as the nurse arrived, but the expression on her face told him what he didn't want confirmed. Lydia Ochieng was gone. Chapter 2. Reg stood in the hallway outside the powder room, hands behind his back, posture just stiff enough to say I'm not in the way, but I'm not leaving either. Bombay sat beside him like a statue, gaze locked forward. A few embassy staffers had gathered at a polite distance, whispering, peeking, retreating. Death tended to do that, especially when it showed up in a silk dress on the floor of a diplomatic gala. A white sheet had been draped over Lydia Ochieng's body. The corner of her clipboard stuck out beneath it. The embassy nurse stood nearby with a walkie-talkie and the kind of strained smile people wore when they had no idea what to do. A janitor had placed a velvet rope across the corridor, as if death needed a do-not-cross sign. "Colonel," came a crisp voice. Amelia Price approached with 2 aides flanking her like parentheses. She didn't look up from her tablet. "We're handling the situation. I appreciate your instinct to assist, but your presence here is unnecessary." Reg didn't blink, didn't realize compassion was jurisdictional. Her head snapped up. "The press is already sniffing. she said. "We need discretion, not dramatics. She was a respected staff member. We owe her dignity. And a cause of death. That's being assessed." He glanced toward the powder room. "By whom?" Price hesitated. "The embassy medical officer is on call. She's reviewing the nurse's notes." Reg stared. Price shifted her weight. "We have protocols in place for this kind of situations." "I'm sure you do," Reg said, "but the situation as you put it doesn't look like an accident. It's premature to assume anything." "Except jurisdiction," he muttered. Voices rose at the end of the hallway. Reg turned to see a tall Kenyan man in a tan blazer and wire-rimmed glasses striding toward the crowd. A local police officer followed behind him, trying and failing to keep up. The man stopped just short of Price and extended a card. "Inspector Kaloum, Directorate of Criminal Investigations. I was called by embassy staff about a body." Reg noticed Amelia's jaw flex. "You were misinformed," she said. "Ms. Ochieng's death is currently being reviewed by our internal medical personnel." "Who are not pathologists," Kaloum replied. "She was a U.S. employee on U.S. premises. She was also a Kenyan citizen, on Kenyan soil." Reg stepped back slightly to give them space. The hallway suddenly felt about 10 degrees hotter. "Inspector," Price said, clenching her teeth, "with all due respect." Kaloum didn't flinch. "I have orders to open an investigation. If the embassy would like to challenge that, I'll wait for the paperwork." They stared at each other. Bombay sneezed. A few minutes later, Kaloum was inside the powder room with gloves on, a junior officer taking notes, and Amelia Price was on the phone with someone in a higher pay grade. Reg moved into a corner by a large potted palm. He didn't like stepping into a mess he hadn't been invited to, but he liked half-truths even less. He crouched next to Bombay and gave him a rub on the head. "You getting anything, buddy?" Bombay tilted his head, then shifted suddenly and padded toward a hallway bench. Sitting stiffly with a cup of water was a man in a slightly crumpled embassy security uniform. Captain Adam Shore. Reg had seen him once or twice at check-in, always looking like he'd just finished a stressful Zoom call. Bombay stopped a foot from him and sat. Shore noticed and gave a twitchy smile. "Hey boy, you're, good dog, smart." Bombay didn't move. Reg crossed the floor. "Captain." Shore stood too quickly. "Sir, I didn't touch anything." Reg frowned. "Why would you say that?" Shore blinked. I meant I didn't disturb the scene. I secured the corridor after the staffer found her. I told the medic not to move her until, well, except for the vitals check, which was unavoidable, but I wrote it all down." He held up his clipboard as a peace offering. Reg didn't take it. "You knew Lydia?" Shore hesitated. "Not personally, but everyone knew her. She was efficient." "That doesn't explain why you're sweating through your shirt. This stuff doesn't happen here." Reg tilted his head. "I'm sure you've seen worse." Shore gave a short laugh that didn't match his eyes. "No, not me, sir. I wasn't that kind of army. 23 years of service, and I always thought there's only one kind." Shore's fingers tightened on the clipboard. "I was in logistics, sir. Paperwork. I was good at making sure everyone had the right kit and enough fuel, but never deployed outside a green zone." Reg studied him for a beat. "So this is your first time up close with something like this?" Shore swallowed. "Yes, sir." Bombay shifted closer, nose twitching toward Shore's boots. Reg straightened. "Well, welcome to the other half of the job." Shore's mouth opened, then shut. "Just tell me what you saw during the evening." "I was rotating between the exterior gates and the courtyard. Nothing unusual." "And before that?" "Lydia asked me to move one of the buffet tables, said it was blocking a fire exit." Reg filed that away. "Did she seem off?" Shore hesitated. "No, but she said something weird." Reg waited. "She said, 'You know I hear everything.' I thought she was joking, like gossip." Reg didn't smile. He nodded once, turned away, and made a mental note to find out who else Lydia had spoken to that evening. Outside, the party crowd had started to dissolve. The quartet had stopped playing. Guests were being politely escorted to the side exits with murmurs about a medical emergency. No one asked too many questions. Reg wandered back into the garden with Bombay trotting beside him. The night air had cooled, and somewhere in the city, fireworks were going off. Someone was celebrating something. Life continued elsewhere. He found General Wekesa by the drink table again, now with his jacket off and sleeves rolled. Wekesa spotted Reg and held up a fresh glass. "We've officially moved on to the grief-drinking portion of the evening." Reg joined him. "You know her?" "Lydia? Everyone knew her. Half the embassy ran on her efficiency." "Didn't seem like she got much credit." "That's the job." Wekesa sipped his drink, then looked at him. "You think it was something sinister?" Reg looked around. "I think people are pretending too hard it wasn't." Wekesa nodded slowly. "Then I suppose we'll find out who's pretending best." Chapter 3. Reg had barely finished his lukewarm coffee when his phone buzzed. Private line, CMD Washington. He sighed and answered with a grunt. "Colonel O'Malley." A woman's voice crackled through. "Sir, it's Sergeant Salazar from CENTCOM, Guam branch. General Halverson asked for a brief on the Nairobi situation. I told him you weren't directly involved." "I'm not," Reg said, "officially." A pause. "Unofficially?" "I watched a woman collapse in the middle of a gala, and now no one seems particularly eager to find out why." "You do have a talent for picking assignments, sir." Reg grunted. Another pause. "I'll tell the general you're waiting for the commencement of the training." "Good call." Salazar lowered her voice. "You want me to ping Langley for anything on the deceased? You know I have my contacts there." "No, not yet." "You don't want intel?" "That's a first." "I want to stay off the radar." That earned him a quiet chuckle. "You, sir, have yet to succeed in that." Reg chuckled and shook his head. She hesitated, then added, "I'll hold back unless something pings on interagency. If they ask where you are..." "I am at the hotel." He hung up. Reg found Lydia's desk on the second floor with the help of a grumpy admin named Calvin, who clearly resented being asked anything before 9 a.m., but a crisp $100 bill made him a bit happier. "You didn't hear this from me," Calvin muttered, unlocking the office with a master key. "They're going to seal it soon. Clearance review or something." The office was neat. Too neat. A bright kikoi scarf still hung over the back of the chair, and a tiny ceramic giraffe sat by her pen cup and a half-drunk mug of some fancy tea that, 12 hours in, still dispersed its fragrance. Reg didn't touch anything. He just stood there with Bombay, taking in the mood of the room. She was very organized and very kind, Calvin said, leaning in the doorway. "Always listened to what you had to say, but lately she'd been a little off." "How so?" "Came in late 2 days last week. Snapped at the communications attaché. Lydia never snapped. And last Thursday, she forgot her ID badge." Reg raised an eyebrow. "That's not exactly a crime. We all have our bad days." Calvin shifted. "No, but when I teased her, she said, 'I've got more important things to track right now.'" That landed a little harder. Reg filed it away. "She have close friends here?" "Not really. She kept her private life private, but I think she talked to Fatima. They both handled event planning." "Fatima?" "Fatima Njoroge, local admin, same floor. She's off today, shaken up." "Any chance you've got her number?" "I shouldn't give it to you." "But?" Calvin sighed. "But I wrote it down already." Reg called Fatima from a quiet spot by the courtyard gate. She answered on the second ring. "Yes?" "Ms. Njoroge, this is Colonel O'Malley. I met you at the gala, briefly." "Oh," she said. "You had the dog." "That's me." A pause. "You're not police." "No." "You're not diplomatic security." "No." "Then why are you calling me?" "Because I don't think Lydia died by accident, and I don't think the people in charge want to ask the right questions." Fatima was quiet. "I'm not here to get anyone in trouble," Reg said, but if Lydia confided in you, anything at all, it might help us understand what happened." Another pause. Then, "She said something to me on Thursday." "I'm listening." "She said she wished she had someone else's ears, that if she repeated what she heard, she'd be out of a job. Or worse." "Did she say what it was about?" "No." "Did she seem scared?" "Not scared," Fatima said. "More disappointed, like she'd finally seen someone for what they were." Later that afternoon, Reg and Bombay passed through the garden again, which was quiet, with the chairs stacked and the decorations boxed. Only a few staff wandered through, cleaning up. It looked like a wedding that had gone sour. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just walking, thinking, letting Bombay sniff the world into order. But then he saw something strange. General Wekesa stood near the veranda, deep in hushed conversation with someone from the American side. A man in his early 40s, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie crooked. Jake Freeman, the embassy's logistics liaison. They weren't talking like old friends. It was tense, sharp gestures, close quarters. Wekesa had one hand jammed into his pocket like he was clenching something. As Reg watched, Freeman said something low, and Wekesa turned his back and walked off. Freeman adjusted his tie and walked in the opposite direction. Bombay gave a low rumble. Reg touched the dog's head gently. "What's Wekesa doing here?" The embassy press office had issued a sanitized statement. The United States Embassy in Nairobi confirms the sudden passing of cultural attaché Lydia Ochieng. Preliminary reports suggest natural causes. At this time, no foul play is suspected. Amelia Price stood outside the comms center reviewing it on a tablet. "That's premature." She didn't look up. "Colonel, you're stating no foul play when the investigation hasn't even been completed." "The Kenyan police have already issued a preliminary finding. I'm aligning with their language." "You mean pressuring them?" Price lowered the tablet. "Colonel O'Malley, with all due respect, you're not part of this inquiry. You are here to plan counterterrorism exercises, not chase embassy gossip." Reg nodded slowly. "Then maybe you should tell the same to General Wekesa, who's wandering somewhere here." Price gave him a look that would have frozen lava. Reg stepped out onto the front steps of the embassy and sat on the stone railing, watching the city hum beyond the gates. He didn't know why this death bothered him more than others. Maybe because Lydia had been so steady, invisible in the way competent women often were, holding up the tent while everyone else played politics. And now, no one seemed all that concerned with who cut the strings. Bombay leaned into his leg and huffed. Reg scratched behind his ears. "You want to sniff around a little more, don't you?" Bombay gave a soft whine. "Me too." Chapter 4. The small cafe sat halfway between the government quarter and the quieter residential streets, the kind of place where no one stayed long enough to notice who came or went. Reg chose a corner table by the window and kept his back to the wall. The ceiling fan above him clicked in a slow, lazy rhythm, stirring the heavy air just enough to keep the flies away. Fatima arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a loose navy tunic and a headscarf patterned with pale yellow flowers. She glanced over her shoulder twice before sliding into the chair opposite him. "I told you everything I know on the phone, Colonel," she said, keeping her voice low. "I figured it was better in person." Reg leaned forward on his elbows. "I heard you were close to Lydia. I also heard you're on leave." Her gaze flicked to the doorway, then back to him. "Who told you that?" "People talk." "I tend to listen." That earned him a faint, humorless smile, gone as quickly as it appeared. "The embassy's already released its statement," she said. "There's nothing more to say." Reg shook his head. "That statement came out before anyone had a chance to look at the facts. I've seen too many of those in my career. Young people die, and the official line wraps it up in a bow without an investigation." Fatima clenched her jaw. "Look, I'm not here to get you in trouble," he went on, "and whatever you tell me stays between us. But if Lydia was your friend, I'm guessing you'd want justice." She looked down at the table. "Justice doesn't come easy here, and not for people in her position." "What position was that?" The pause stretched. Then she said, She was seeing someone she wasn't supposed to. Not supposed to because he's married. Fatima's eyes were steady now, like she'd decided she'd already gone too far to pull back. And because if people found out, it would be bad for both of them. Maybe worse for her. Was he embassy staff? Reg asked. I don't know. Local? I said I don't know. Fatima thought for a moment. Lydia was very private. She would never risk losing her job. But I saw the way she'd dress on some days, the way she'd disappear early. She'd come back looking. She stopped herself, lips pressing into a line. Looking like what? Like she'd been happy. That's all I'll say. Reg let that sit. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the only way to get someone to talk was to let the silence hang until it got uncomfortable. Fatima broke it first. Why are you doing this? Because I don't like watching innocent lives get swept under the rug, Reg said. She hesitated again, then reached into her bag. When her hand came out, it held a crumpled receipt with a street name scrawled in pen. That's the police station. Inspector Kaloum. Talk to him. Reg took the paper and folded it neatly into his pocket. Appreciate it. If anyone finds out we spoke, they won't. Kaloum's office was a cramped rectangle of beige walls and battered file cabinets, the kind of room where paperwork went to die. The inspector was behind his desk, pen moving steadily over a form. He didn't look up right away. Colonel O'Malley, he said finally, we've already given the embassy all the information we have. I'm not here for the embassy, Reg said, stepping inside. I'm here because a young woman's dead and no one seems interested in why. Kaloum set the pen down, his gaze sharpening. These situations are delicate, and this is a Kenyan investigation. I get that, Reg said, but I've read too many official statements that wash the truth clean. I was in too many situations where someone young didn't get justice. I'm done watching it happen. The inspector leaned back in his chair, eyes on Reg like he was weighing whether this American was just another meddler. You speak like a man with a long service record, Kaloum said. Long enough to know that when things get buried, they tend to stay that way. Something in Kaloum's expression shifted, less guarded, more curious. He stood and grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Follow me. The two men walked down a side corridor to a door marked Forensic Services. The room beyond didn't have a nice smell. Dr. Cato, a thin man with short silver hair, was jotting notes beside a stainless steel exam table. He glanced up at Kaloum. Inspector? Tell the colonel what you found on the Lydia Ochieng case. Cato hesitated. Externally, the most notable finding was a small puncture mark just behind the left ear. Clean entry, no surrounding bruising. We assumed some kind of injection, but the tox screen was negative for all common agents. No sedatives, no street drugs, nothing. Reggie's brow furrowed. And the mark itself? Precise. Could have been made by someone with medical training, or someone in certain military or intelligence roles. Reg gave a short nod. It wasn't random, then. No, Cato said. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. Kaloum crossed his arms. So we wanted to start with people who could have had both access and the skill. Reg looked at the men. Let me help you. Chapter 5. Reg caught shore just as the security chief was heading down the embassy steps with a to-go coffee in hand. Colonel O'Malley, Shore said, half-smile fixed in place. Shouldn't you be knee-deep in training drills by now? Change of plans, Reg said easily. Turns out I left some training materials behind in the conference room. I'll be in and out. Shore's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. Fine, sign in with the front desk and keep your badge visible. Reg gave a short nod and headed inside, Bombay padding at his side. He signed the log, clipped his badge, and made his way up to the second floor. He expected to see Lydia's bright kikoi scarf draped over her chair like last time. Instead, her desk was sterile. No mug, no ceramic giraffe, no stray folders, like she'd never worked there at all. Reg stood for a moment, taking it in. This looked like a cover-up. Calvin's head poked in the door. Morning, Colonel. Calvin, you're the man I need. Reg pulled a crisp 100 from his pocket and stretched his hand for a handshake. Calvin pocketed the money and smiled. "How can I help?" "Lydia's things," Reg said. "Where'd they go?" Calvin looked around him and lowered his voice. "Shore had everything boxed up yesterday. Said it was for a clearance review." "And where are the boxes now?" "In his office," Calvin said, glancing toward the far end of the hall. "Under lock and key." Reg held Calvin's gaze. "Look," Calvin said, "I don't know what's going on, but the way they cleared her out, like they couldn't wait to erase her." Reg nodded once, his mind already moving to the next step. Kaloum was smoking outside the police station when Reg pulled up in a beat-up taxi, the sun dropping low enough to throw long shadows across the dusty courtyard. "You said this was important," Kaloum said, walking over. "It is." Reg paid the driver and got out. The embassy's already boxed up Lydia's personal effects. They're in Shore's office, locked. If you want any chance at learning what she was working on, or who she was talking to, you'll need those boxes. Kaloum's eyebrows rose. "And you expect they'll just hand them over to me?" "Not if you demand them as evidence," Reg said, "but maybe if you ask nicely on behalf of Lydia's family." Calumet folded his arms. "You want me to pretend I've been approached by her relatives?" "Not pretend," Reg said evenly. "Just phrase it so no one can say you're fishing. They don't have to know the family hasn't been in touch yet." Kaloum studied him for a long beat. "You've done this before." Reg's mouth twitched. "Different continents. Same song." Kaloum exhaled, then pulled out his phone. "Fine. I'll draft the request, make it sound official enough to pass embassy protocol. But what if they push back?" "Oh, I'm sure they will," Reg said, "and that's when you guilt-trip them, hard." The inspector gave him a thin smile. "You're enjoying this, Colonel?" Reg shook his head. "Not really. I just don't like the idea of watching them scrub this poor woman from existence without doing anything." Kaloum slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Give me a day. If I get the boxes, you'll be the first to know." Reg glanced toward the horizon. "Make it half a day. The longer they sit in Shore's office, the better the chance something disappears." Kaloum nodded and headed back inside. Chapter 6. Kaloum was leaning against his sedan when Reg walked out of the hotel, Bombay padding at his side. The inspector had one hand in his pocket and a plain brown paper bag in the other, like a man who'd just been sent on the world's most joyless errand. "This is what the embassy sent over," he said, holding it out. "Insisted it was all they had." Reg peered inside. A soft patterned scarf, a mug with the words "Nairobi, City in the Sun," and a tiny ceramic giraffe sat on top of a leather handbag. "That's it? That's it." "Generous," Reg muttered, lifting the bag out. The leather was worn but good quality, with a faint scent of perfume still clinging to it. Bombay gave it a cursory sniff. Kaloum folded his arms. "They told me her desk had been cleared the day after she died, embassy security chief's orders. Claimed it was for confidentiality until they knew what to give to the family." "Right," Reg said, "because a ceramic giraffe's a state secret." They set the items on the hood of the car. Reg unbuckled the bag and went through the main compartment. Wallet, a half-used pack of mints, 2 pens, a receipt from a cafe, and nothing else of note. He frowned, then ran his fingers along the inside lining. The corner was thicker, stitched tighter. He pressed until he felt something solid, flat, and rectangular. "Hold this," he said, passing Kaloum the bag. Reg pulled a small folding knife from his pocket and carefully slit the seam. A thin black smartphone slid out. "Well, well," Reg said. Kaloum raised an eyebrow. "Not embassy issue." "Looks like a personal burner," Reg said, "and if it was in a hidden pocket, she didn't want anyone knowing she had it." The inspector took it, turning it over in his hand. "Password protected." "Of course it is," Reg said. "You know someone who can open it?" Kaloum's mouth twitched into something between a smirk and a wince. "My daughter. She's good with tech." "How good?" "Good enough to make me very nervous." They drove across town, Bombay in the back seat with his head out the window, catching the scents of the city. Nairobi was sliding from afternoon into that golden, dust-hazed light that softened the edges of the buildings and made the street vendors' wares glow like they'd been staged for a magazine spread. "You don't strike me as a tech guy," Reg said, watching Kaloum navigate traffic with one hand on the wheel. "I'm not," Kaloum said. "That's her mom's genes. She's a math teacher." "Does she work for a tech company?" Reg asked. "Actually, she worked for the PD for a while but got tired of bureaucracy. She's a freelancer now." Reg allowed himself a small grin. "That's why you trust her with evidence." "We are very different, but she's my daughter," Kaloum said. "I trust her with everything." They pulled into a narrow lane off a busy street. A row of weathered shopfronts leaned together like old friends. At the end was a metal roll-up door painted with a giant pair of stylized eyes. "This her place?" Reg asked. "Upstairs," Kaloum said, parking. The stairwell smelled faintly of engine oil and incense. On the second floor, Kaloum knocked on a door covered in stickers, tech brands, slogans, and a cartoon hippo in sunglasses. It swung open to reveal a young woman with short twists, dyed copper at the ends, wearing a hoodie that read, 404, not found. "Daddy," she gave the inspector a hug. "And friend, come in." "Reg O'Malley," Kaloum said by way of introduction. "Reg, this is Amina." Amina's office was a room half filled with monitors, cables, and stacks of mismatched hardware. One wall was lined with books, some on coding, others on photography and politics. "What is it today?" she asked, pulling up a chair and gesturing for the phone. Kaloum handed it over. "Locked. Need it open." She turned it over in her hands, noting the scuffed edges. "Where'd you get it?" "Don't ask," Kaloum said. Amina grinned. "That means it's gonna be good." She connected the phone to a small device on her desk and began typing rapidly, the screen filling with lines of scrolling code. Reg stood back, taking in the scene. "Inspector, you do realize your daughter is a hacker, right?" Kaloum gave him a proud smile. "The best one in Nairobi." Reg grinned. "I know the feeling." Then turned to Amina. "How long?" "Depends," Amina said without looking up. "Could be 10 minutes, could be an hour, could be never, if whoever set this up actually knew what they were doing." "And if they didn't?" Reg asked. "Then we're in 5. Reg crossed his arms. "I'll take those odds." 4 minutes later, the phone's lock screen flashed, then slid away. Amina tapped through to the photo gallery. "Oh," she said, eyebrows lifting. "Well, that's interesting." Kaloum stepped closer. "What is it?" Amina angled the screen so both men could see. "Logistics manifests and a few very compromising photos." Reg clenched his jaw. "That's not what I expected," Kaloum murmured. The photos kept sliding by, each more surprising than the last. Reg exchanged a glance with Kaloum. "Looks like we've got our list of suspects." Kaloum nodded slowly, eyes still on the phone. "And our first real lead." Chapter 7. The armory was packed. Rows of rifles stood in racks like soldiers waiting for orders, but even before the inventory started, Reg's gut told him something was off. Wakesa walked beside him, a clipboard tucked under one arm, the stiff-brimmed cap of the Kenyan Defense Forces shadowing his eyes. "We start with small arms," he said, motioning to the racks. "Sidearms first, then rifles, ammo at the end." "Sounds good," Reg replied, rolling his shoulders. He'd been in Nairobi for almost a week, juggling ceremonial nonsense at the embassy and prep for this anti-terrorism program. Now, finally, they were doing what he came here to do. 2 sergeants from Wekesa's unit stood ready to assist, one reading out serial numbers while the other checked them off. Reg leaned in, his eyes scanning more than just the list. "We're planning to run both teams through night ops?" Wakesa gave a tight nod. "Yes, twice during the week." "Then these rifles are light," Reg said. "You've got 18 in this rack. We planned for 24. Wakesa frowned, checking the clipboard. "Manifest says 18. "Your manifest's wrong, General," Reg said flatly. "I know for a fact the order was for 24. The sergeants exchanged a glance but kept working. They moved to the rifles, and again the numbers came up short. Not by much, but enough that Reggie's internal alarm bells started ringing. By the time they reached the ammo crates, he was sure. "This isn't half of what we need for the training plan," Reg said, crouching to run a hand over the stenciled labels. "We're going to burn through this in 2 days. Vakesa squatted beside him. "I did not order this shipment. All supply requisitions for the American side were handled by Freeman." Reg studied him. The man looked genuinely irritated, not defensive. "Freeman?" Reg repeated. "Yes," Vakesa said, logistics liaison at the embassy. "What does he have to do with an ammo order?" "Everything at the embassy goes through him." By midday, they'd inventoried every last crate. Reg called for a short break before the afternoon range work, ducking into the small office adjacent to the arsenal. He closed the door and pulled out his phone. Salazar answered on the second ring. "CENTCOM, Guam branch. Salazar speaking." "It's me," Reg said. "You don't sound like you're calling to chat." "I need a favor. Pull background on Freeman. Full service record." "Specific reason?" "Missing gear," Reg said. "And a lot of it. Enough that our joint training plan's going to crash unless I cut half the scenarios." Salazar gave a low whistle. "All right, give me an hour." Wekesa found him back on the training field, laying out an improvised afternoon plan. "We will have to adjust the night exercises," he said quietly. "Not until I know why we're adjusting them," Reg replied. The Kenyan's jaw flexed. "You suspect corruption?" Reg didn't answer, but his silence was enough. The call came from Salazar just before dusk, while Reg was overseeing a vehicle drill. He stepped away, one eye still on the training field. "You're not going to like this," she said without preamble. "Freeman's got a buddy in your embassy security office. Sure, recognize the name?" Reggie's grip on the phone tightened. "Yeah, head of security." They both came out of the same division in the Army, logistics unit. Retired early, too early to be voluntary. Back then there were, let's call them supply chain discrepancies. Things went missing. Big things. Trucks, weapon parts, you name it. Nothing ever stuck to them, but the suspicion was enough to push them out. Next thing you know, they both land in embassy jobs in the middle of nowhere. "And now they're in Nairobi," Reg said slowly. "Yep, in positions that give them control over what comes in and out." Reg looked across the yard, where Wekesa was talking to his team, his co-lead in this training, and now a man who might be caught in the middle. "Any idea how they ended up here together?" "Officially, paperwork said assignment availability and prior cooperation, which is bureaucrat speak for someone pulled strings." Reg exhaled through his nose. Someone at State or Defense probably thought it was easier to bury them here than deal with them stateside. "That's my read," Salazar said. "So, what do you want me to do next?" "Nothing," Reg said. "I'll handle it." There was a pause. "Sir, these guys are career paper pushers with friends in high places. You go after them without backup, you might—" "I said I'll handle it." Chapter 8. Reg crossed the embassy courtyard at a clipped pace, scanning the entry post. 2 Marine security guards stood at the gate, rifles slung, eyes tracking the street. "Morning, Colonel," one called. "Morning," Reg said without breaking stride. Then he stopped just past them, turned, and jerked his head toward the main building. "You two, with me." They fell in step without question. Inside, the air was cool, the hum of air conditioning replacing the heat haze buzz outside. Reg didn't slow until they reached the logistics office on the 2nd floor. He didn't knock. Shore and Freeman looked up from the desk, Shore with a pen in midair, Freeman halfway through a sip of coffee. "Colonel O'Malley," Shore said, guarded, "didn't expect—" "Step away from the desk, hands where I can see them." They blinked at him, then at the Marines flanking the doorway. "Is this some kind of a joke?" Freeman asked. "Does it look like I'm laughing?" Reg's tone left no room for argument. "Back to the wall, now." The Marines moved in, their presence filling the small room. Shore's voice rose. Colonel, you can't just... I have probable cause to believe you've compromised U.S. government property and endangered an active counterterrorism operation. That's all the authority I need. The Marines arrived fast, rifles slung, eyes sharp. Sir? Sergeant, these two are to be detained under my authority as commanding officer of the joint exercise. Secure them in the holding room and call the military police detachment at Camp Lemonnier. Tell them Colonel O'Malley is requesting immediate pickup for transfer to U.S. custody. Yes, sir. Freeman stepped forward. This is insane. Back against the wall, hands behind your head, the sergeant ordered, already pulling flex cuffs from his belt. Shore tried again. You can't do this. I just did, Reg said, stepping close enough for Shore to feel the weight in his voice. And the MPs will be here in under 2 hours to make it official. As the Marines cuffed them and led them out, Reg turned to the nearest embassy phone. Get me the RSO, he told the operator. Tell him I've secured 2 of his people for suspected theft and supply manipulation, and he's going to want to hear the rest in person. Callum was leaning against his dented Toyota when Reg came down the embassy steps. The Nairobi sun was already harsh, bleaching the concrete and pressing sweat into the collar of his fatigues. 2 Marines trailed behind him to the gate, then peeled away at his nod. Callum straightened. You look like a man who just set off an alarm in Washington. Wouldn't be the first time, Reg said. He kept moving toward the car. I don't have much time before the brass yanks me back, which means we do this now. Do what? Reg opened the passenger door. Tell me what a Kenyan general fears most. Callum blinked. Bad press. Reputation is everything here. You tarnish that, and he's finished. That's what I thought. Reg slid into the seat, slammed the door. Then take me to Wekesa's villa, and while you're at it, call every pit bull of a journalist you know and tell them to meet us there. Callum hesitated, but only for a second. You want press vultures circling his house? Exactly. The villa sat on a quiet lane, lined with palms and high stone walls topped with glass shards. Security lights glared even in broad daylight. Callum parked across the street. You sure about this? He asked. Nope. Reg got out, straightened his uniform. Stay here. Keep the reporters back until I give a sign. Callum pulled out his phone, muttering something in Swahili that sounded like a prayer. Reg crossed the street and rapped his knuckles on the heavy teak door. It opened after a pause. General Wekesa stood in pressed slacks and a white shirt, collar open. His eyes widened. O'Malley? I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow's training. Reg kept his voice flat. Not sure I'll be in the country tomorrow morning. I've got one question first. Wekesa frowned. What is this about? Reg reached into his pocket and produced Lydia's second phone. He tapped the screen, brought up the photo of her and Wekesa. He held it up. Did you kill her? The general's face went the color of ash. What kind of question is that? Simple one. Yes or no? Wekesa swallowed hard. I had nothing to do with that girl's death. That picture means nothing. Really? Because this was her secret phone. Reg scrolled with his thumb, letting the screen glow with lines of intimate messages. And it's full of your texts, so lose the act. The general's shoulders slumped. His voice dropped. All right, I had an affair with her, but I swear to you, I did not kill her. I would never. You'll forgive me if I don't take your word for it. Reg leaned closer. There are journalists and police outside your gate. They'll have a field day if you don't come clean right now. Before Wekesa could reply, a sharp female voice cut across the hall. He's telling the truth. A side door opened. A tall woman in a silk house dress stepped out, her hair pulled into a severe knot. Her eyes were cold, steady. Wekesa turned, horrified. Margaret? She ignored him and looked straight at Reggie. I killed her. That girl was going to ruin my family. My husband has spent a lifetime building his name, and she was ready to drag it through the dirt. Wekesa staggered back as though struck. Margaret, what are you saying? She lifted her chin. You know me. I see a threat. I remove it. I planned it for weeks. The gala was perfect. I waited in the powder room. When she refused to end it with you, I used a muscle relaxant from the hospital, a small injection behind the ear. She collapsed minutes later. Reg felt his stomach knot. You just confessed to murder, ma'am. I confessed to saving my family, she said coolly. No one would have ever known. Wekesa covered his face with his hands. Dear God. Reg exhaled slowly. Well, now everyone will. Stay here. He opened the front door and called across the drive. Kaloum, we've got a confession. Escort Mrs. Wekesa quietly. Side door. Kalume hurried over, his eyes widening as Margaret walked past him without protest, her expression still composed. He led her toward his car. Reg stood on the porch with Wekesa sagging behind him like a broken man. Callum returned a minute later, wiping his forehead. She's in the car. We'll take her to the station. O'Malley. He extended a hand. Without you, I would never have solved this murder. Thank you. Reg shook it firmly. Just doing the job. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the caller, I.D. Salazar. He sighed. That's my cue. He answered, Yeah, Sarge. Her voice crackled sharply through the line. Colonel, you're in big trouble. Reg pinched the bridge of his nose, staring at the villa's white facade. Story of my life. Chapter 9. The air in Guam was heavy, salt and heat clinging to Reg's uniform collar as he stood stiff in front of the mahogany desk. Across from him, Major General Halverson leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, the weight of the Pacific Command pressing down through every crease in his starched uniform. You don't make my job easy, O'Malley. Halverson's voice was steady but sharp. Flying off script in Nairobi? Ordering embassy marines around like you were staging a coup? That stunt could have gone international. Reg stayed silent. He'd been dressed down before, but this one carried the edge of permanence. Halverson flipped open a folder on his desk, not really needing to read from it. By rights, I should have you discharged. No honors, no retirement, just a one-way ticket out of uniform. And frankly, O'Malley, the brass wanted exactly that. He let the words hang, heavy as steel. Reg didn't move. But, Halverson went on, tapping the folder shut with a thud, your grandfather's name is inked all over these walls. A 4-star general doesn't fade quietly into the background, and if I discharge you, I know for a fact he'll storm the Pentagon and possibly rip me a new one. That earned the faintest flicker at the corner of Reggie's mouth. Halverson leaned forward. So here's what's going to happen. You're being pulled from the field. Effective immediately. Administrative duty only. Paperwork, oversight, nothing more dangerous than a stapler. And you, Colonel, are officially non-deployable until further notice. Reggie's chest tightened, though he gave no sign. I'm not finished, Halverson added, with grim satisfaction. You're going to complete 20 hours of mandatory therapy. That's an order. Reg raised an eyebrow. Therapy, sir? Don't test me. You need it. God knows everyone who's ever worked with you agrees. Halverson closed the folder and pushed it aside. Dismissed, Colonel. Don't make me regret giving you this much rope. Reg saluted, crisp and cold, then turned on his heel. Next morning, he pushed open the door to the base hospital's psychiatry wing. Bombay padded in like he owned the place. He knocked on door 174. A woman in uniform looked up from a file. Her insignia read, Major Alexandra Romanoff. She raised an eyebrow. Colonel O'Malley. Major. He gave a stiff nod. She flicked her eyes to Bombay. I don't recall canine therapy being part of the program. Reg shrugged. Bombay goes where I go. You want me here, he's here too. Noted. She closed the file with deliberate calm. Have a seat. I'll stand. Suit yourself. She folded her hands. How's your sleep? He smirked. With one eye open, for the past 23 years. She didn't flinch. Nightmares? Only when I'm awake. For a moment they just stared at each other. Bombay gave a low huff and lay down, tail thumping once against the floor. Alex leaned back in her chair. You've got a reputation, Colonel. Decorated again, family name carved into half the bases in this country, so let me guess, you think this is a waste of time. I know it is. She tilted her head. And yet, here you are. Ordered. You always follow orders? He gave a crooked smile. Depends who's giving them. That earned the faintest twitch of a grin from her. Well, lucky you. For the next few months, I'm the one giving them. Reg chuckled under his breath. This is gonna be hell. Bombay thumped his tail again like he agreed. Alex sat forward, her tone still cool but her eyes sharper now. Tell me, Colonel, do you plan to spend all 20 hours of therapy trying to outstubborn me? That depends. On what? Whether you're worth the trouble. A long silence. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, quick and unguarded. All right, O'Malley, let's dance. This has been Death by Red Tape, an Island Whodunnit origin story, written by Tess Marlowe. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next mystery. See you on San Malvino.